June 21st, 2025. Well, summer already, huh? Any rate, well, I guess the ongoing saga of the Middle East conflict between Israel and Iran is ongoing, and the big question is, what will Donald Trump do? He's given them these 2 week warning, I guess you'd say, a day or so ago. So uh, the clock is ticking for whatever that means. And so I want to kind of get into a few things, see what we got. I mean, I've been following this on a lot of sources and getting good a picture as I can of whatever's going on. It looks like at this point in time that Iran has fired about 400 medium-range missiles at Israel, and the actual number of impacts, I'm not sure I got a clear count on that. They are saying recently that the Israeli interception rate has fallen off some. I've heard numbers like 65%. But I don't know that's really, I think there might have been one day where that was the situation. But like the last day they fired, like last time, I think they fired 5 missiles and they intercepted all of them. So overall, I would say that it probably has fallen down at maybe in the 80% range or something like that. It's not near as bad as what you'll get if you're watching the people like on Judge Napolitano or Daniel Davis deep dive. It's not quite that bad. But they have scored some strikes. I guess they destroyed the Israeli stock market. They hit a hospital. They hit some facility very close to Haifa port. They set a refinery on fire, killed a bunch of people, and blew up a lot of things. So far, I don't seem they've done anything to really degrade Israel's military capacity. And Israel's continuing to launch ongoing strikes, although the number of going has fallen off from maybe 200 planes to maybe something like 50 planes a day, the sorties. And so, the level has kind of dropped off a bit, I think, which you expect because of the maintenance issues and, operational readiness of the airplanes to continue those level of attacks. So anyhow, on the Israeli side, I guess there's been substantial damage. Something like I'm hearing 14 or 15 nuclear scientists working on the project for the Iranians have been killed, and the replacement chief of staff was killed. A lot of things have happened during since the last video, but the basic theme of what I've had in there on my videos is pretty well accurate, I believe. Israel has been focusing on targeting the missile launchers, which have had a significant effect on degrading the Iranian attacks. And of course, they've been hitting a variety of other military targets throughout Iran and so forth. So far, the energy infrastructure overall has been largely avoided, other than a few fuel tank strikes and stuff like that. And perhaps maybe because the U.S. is insisting on that also, because we don't want to mess up the world economy here. And there are other good reasons as well. So that kind of is kind of the state of play. It's an ongoing battle. Obviously, um, the Ayatollah is still alive and has been protected by, if nothing else, by an edict of President Trump, because I guess he wants somebody to negotiate with, right? So anyway, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. We need more supporters, and you can, of course, follow me on Rumble if you're not on YouTube, and the address in the description below. Yeah, so that's kind of the way I see the state of play on the war so far. The this Fordow, I guess it's pronounced, site has been the big bone of contention, which has been apparently hasn't been attacked yet. And also at the same time, I would say, in addition to not being attacked, it's uh, allegedly the whole pitch has been that Israel doesn't have the capability with the bunker buster bombs that we provided them, which are the 5,000-pound class ones, which are either GBU 28s or the new 72s. I mentioned 72 before, which is supposedly a little bit better, but it's in the same weight class. Although to me, I still think if you look at the site, I do have got a picture of it which I've posted on my X account, and I can post a link to that in the description below uh, uh, for people to see that. But if you look at it, it's a very rugged terrain, And the real question, which may be holding President Trump up on his decision, in part is, will, as I mentioned before in my last video, will the attack actually work? Because, well, the bomb has been tested in the White Sands Proving Grounds against the desert and shows it will penetrate in the ground. This is a very irregular mountain type structure with angles of rock in various degrees, and which could deflect the bomb off of its intended trajectory and prevent it from penetrating all the way down. Also, there seems to be some ongoing debate about how deep the thing really is. I mean, the 300 feet seems to be now the consensus, but I've heard deeper things claimed, some of which are probably unrealistic. But do we really know? Well, I don't know. With Israeli intelligence knowing where all these officials and scientists are located, maybe they do. And so I don't know. I would think that you could, one thing you could do clearly would be to attack there's like four, I believe, tunnel openings to the actual underground facility. You could certainly target those and collapse those so you couldn't get in there. And of course, I think there've already been attacks on the electric power supply for it. And all those centrifuges need a lot of electricity, although eventually that could be replaced, I think, but not immediately. The, so really, the other idea that's been thrown out on the press a lot is the idea that Israel could try some kind of a commando raid using one of our elite units to do this. Although, first of all, I would think the Iranians would have deployed military forces around the perimeters of this thing so that it would be fairly difficult to get in there. And this group would have to be able to carry enough explosives to destroy a large number of centrifuges. So I don't know. We'll see. If they pull that off, that'll be good. But that would be, I would think, more the kind of thing you would do early in the thing. The element of surprise is now kind of lost, and I'm dubious that that would work. And so it kind of awaits whatever the President Trump does. On the other hand, the Russians, there's another site there, which the name I forget that. But at any rate, the Russians have, I don't know what they're doing at that site, whether it's a reactor or what. I would think it would be, at any rate, there's 200 Russian technical personnel there assisting the Iranians, and Putin is saying he won't pull them out. So I guess sort of using them as kind of well, a bit of a chip on the shoulder, those people's lives versus, the idea of deterrence. So we'll see how that goes. But I understand that site hasn't been attacked yet either. Um, but the main all the rest of the infrastructure, because in order before you get to the centrifuge, you have to do some chemical processing of uranium, and there's uranium tetrafluoride first, then they process it into uranium hexafluoride, which is a very heavy gas, and you use that in a centrifuge. And so that is one of the key issues on that. Now, the claim of the IEA is that the Iranians have something like 900 kilos of 60% enriched U-238, uranium, well, 60% 235 versus the remaining 40% be 238, of course. So there's just a very quick step then to take that all the way up to 90% plus, which is your weapons grade that you want in your bombs. And the argument, by the way, this has got into a thing in the press between Tulsi Gabbard and the president, is what is the real intentions and activities of the Iranians? Basically, and back in March, she stated the ongoing position of the intelligence community, which is a consensus of various agencies, CIA and DIA and all those, intelligence agencies, NSA, whatever, as to what they believe the situation is. And they believe that Iran is not working on a nuclear bomb, which raises the issue, why are they putting all this effort and taking all this punishment to get to 60% enriched uranium if they're not going to make a bomb? Well, what would you do with it if you didn't make a bomb? There's no practical need for anything that enriched if you're not making a bomb. But on the other hand, some people say, well, it's just sort of I guess, a threat that we might make a bomb, is what Iran is saying to the world. And of course, when you send that to somebody like the Israelis with the history of the Holocaust and the pogroms and everything over all the years, their perception of that is not the same as maybe somebody in a think tank in the United States would be having. they would tend to think, that we can't chance that. Just like the Russians see the NATO project in Ukraine as a threat to them in a way that maybe we might not consider, although I think we would consider something analogous to that a threat, actually. If, say, if China was organizing Mexico and arming it up and trying to form an alliance against the United States, I think we would have some very strong attitudes toward that. So, but at any rate, so that's the Israeli attitude, and I think, I guess the question is, if the intelligence community hasn't recommended that, who did? The Israeli intelligence community? Probably. But at any rate, so we're waiting for Trump's decision. One interesting thing is that they stated that all the options are on the table, including a tactical nuke. Also, interesting enough, the E-4B, which is the command and control aircraft to be used in the event of a nuclear war, has apparently been flown to Andrews, I guess, at Washington area, they said, but I presume to mean Andrews. I don't think they brought it into Reagan National, so so I presume it's at Andrews, a military base, joint base now, not used to be Air Force Base. So, so it's there, and I guess I don't know if it's still there, but it was brought in there, and so so maybe that plus a tactical nuke, is that connect? Maybe that's making that threat credible. But the general opinion is that it will be if they go, they'll use the big 30,000 pound penetrator bomb, the GBU 57, and they're even doubtful whether that will do the job or not. They generally think they'll need to launch two of them, one into each other, like drilling a hole, just like I mentioned. But I would say maybe you could do it with like 5 or 6 of the 5,000 pounders. It seems to me like Israel should try that before we actually commit to a conflict. Now, the issue we have is the risk is obviously that Iran is probably threatening that they'd launch a big attack against well, not just our military bases, but in the area, but also potentially, well, they haven't said this, they could attack the oil facilities of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. Because in addition to these medium range missiles they've been shooting at Israel, they have a large stockpile of shorter range missiles, probably more of them, that could hit all those targets in the Persian Gulf area and in Iraq. And so, plus they have a lot of these drones. They haven't been using too many of them, but they've used a few so far. But those drones also can be sent, and particularly be dangerous to fielded infantry troops and stuff like that, or maybe even oil facilities, because so there's a real concern we could have a disaster on our hands if this thing escalates, which is one thing I think is holding everybody back a little bit. And of course, so I noticed it was kind of interesting on the Napolitano show, the intelligence weekly intelligence review uh, between the shirt and the other guy. They totally disagree on the facts, even though they both have a hostile attitude to this whole situation. One of them thinks that Trump was brought into it by an Israeli influenced company and was fully on board with the thing, and the other guy thinks that 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 basically Israel did the attack and Trump was brought into it pretty much at the last minute and saw how well it was going and come up and thought, yeah, I was all for it all along. I'll leave that for whatever you think, but it's kind of interesting. At any rate, if that's the case, then Israel's jumped off something which they might not be able to finish, and are needing us to come in to do the coup de grace, so to speak. At any rate, so that's kind of the state of play for the moment. Maybe I don't know whether Iran is getting more accurate or they just got lucky on some of those strikes. I mean, although some of the newer missiles might be more accurate than some of the older ones. Um, my own thought on this is that it's kind of been a big mistake making a big deal about how Israel couldn't do it. Because my thought is, wouldn't it be smarter rather than debating what we're going to do? If we're going to do it, just make it a classified operation and do it. I mean, Israel could be flying a bunch of sorties in before we go in. Then we'd fly in and drop a bomb on that deep underground facility, drop our penetrators, and then maybe Israel would launch a few more sorties against other things around there. And then just say nothing. If we could do that for a few days, and then maybe go talk to the Chinese and say, well, if they really do go all out, we'll knock out the oil facilities of Iran, and therefore you need to pressure them not to retaliate. But we've done what we've done. We don't want to do anymore. And if you'll just accept it, we'll just pretend it didn't happen, and then we can get on with the end of this thing. But maybe I'm being naive on that. But to me, it's a little bit like, well, by talking about it so much, you almost have them so embarrassed that they have to do something radical if we do the attack. Whereas, there have been attacks like when Israel attacked a reactor in Syria some years back. They didn't say anything about it. The whole thing leaked out about a month later, I think. And by that time, there was no real response to it. And that might be the best way to handle a situation like this. So, anyway, we'll see how it works out. I think it's dragging on for a while, and I guess maybe another 2 weeks. Some people think that Trump might launch the mission before the 2 weeks are up, and other people I think may think he's really not going to do it at all, and he really wants a negotiated settlement. And in principle, a good negotiated settlement could be better, as I've said before, because that would allow the IEA or international inspectors to go in there and really verify what's happening. Because do we even know for sure where the 900 kilograms of uranium are located? And if they're located, well, someplace else, maybe they have centrifuges at some other location that they haven't spun up yet either, because apparently our satellites, as I've learned years ago, can actually detect the electronic signatures, these high RPM centrifuges, because they're electronically driven by motors. And so anyhow, it's possible that they could have some in storage somewhere, and then at a later date, after this conflict is over and things have settled down, they could start processing stuff again. That's a risk that's out there. As is the risk, what if they already have made a bomb or two and they haven't told anybody? So, this is still a situation with the Chinese and the Russians getting a little involved, and the Chinese have some intelligence ships in the Persian Gulf monitoring all these activities and no doubt reporting it back to the Iranians, which gives it another aspect to the whole thing. And there's been at least 4 large cargo planes flying with China with something, maybe air defense missiles or offensive missiles potentially. Who knows? So those are issues we have to think about too. So anyway, that's kind of the state of play right now, but it is a very important thing. I know there's a lot of pushback from the certain parts of the right-wing community that don't want to get involved, and there's all the Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz debate, which I thought that Tucker was being a little bit, well, I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, it got into, the normal debate you get on that. I was able to withstand about an hour and a half of it and went, okay, I know where they're going with this, but, you know, at any rate, but I hope we can all settle this thing off and get this over without out of calamity happening, because it does risk some pretty major threats to the world economy, particularly if the Strait of Hormuz gets blocked. That could be a really big one. And so anyway, so that's about it for this time. I'll be, of course, posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. And like I said, I'll try to post a link to that thing I put on X about the actual site that's been in discussion. So that'll be it for this time. So all for now.